Okay, the game's been out for a bit, so now that we've all beaten Silksong without giving up or breaking any of our controllers, we can talk about some of the game's great moments. There are loads of great gameplay moments in Silksong, and in these moments, the music works in tandem with the game design to deliver a precisely tuned and incredibly impactful experience. The music doesn't just fit perfectly with each moment the game is trying to create, but it also adds an extra layer of depth that enhances the intended effect, and sometimes deepens our understanding of the world of the game at the same time. My favorite of these moments might just have to be the fight against the Cogwork Dancers. The boss fight itself is unique, a set piece that would be memorable enough on mute for the twin synchronized boss attacks that force you to keep track of dodging 2 strikes from different directions simultaneously. This is a fun gameplay idea that brings something fresh to the fighting system at a pretty deep point in the game. But with the addition of the music, this gameplay idea is elevated into art. These synchronized attacks introduce a rhythmic element to the battle. The 2 bosses attack at a consistent timing, taking roughly 2 beats of music to telegraph each attack and then 2 beats to execute it. The result is these bosses leaping around each other in a deadly dance, and the music takes that idea and gives these dancers something to move to, turning the battle into a lethal ballet. The music evokes the aesthetic of ballet quite nicely. The strings provide the proper rhythmic feel with a low bass note on beat 1 of each measure, jumping up to staccato chords giving us every other beat. This gives our Cogwork ballerinos a steady pulse to dance to. The melody on top is performed by a music box with mechanical clicking and clacking to the beat, evoking the sort of mechanism that makes a music box work. Right from these first few bars, we have the boss fight summed up for us perfectly clearly. They're machines, robots that run on an interlocking collection of gears and springs, alluded to by the clockwork ticking in the music. These robots are dancers as well, and so the style of the composition and the instruments used allude to the rich tradition of Romantic-era ballet. And what device stands perfectly in the center of these 2 contrasting ideas? Of course, the music box. It's a perfect representation of these 2 elements. These analog automatons are both mechanical and graceful, just like a music box. And of course, when the battle starts, the title card telling us their name puts these 2 elements of their design together in a perfectly precise little package. Cogwork Dancers. Now, the musical inspiration of ballet comes into play with the melody and harmony and the rich, emotional approach of the writing. This is balanced by the need to serve as boss music, and so the imminent danger of facing these creatures requires a minor key. So we open in the key of C minor with this dark-sounding B diminished 7 to C minor resolution. The melody establishes our main motive that we'll be working with throughout the piece. A jump down from the 5th to the root of the key, and then walking up the scale to land on the 4th, an F. This figure cleanly carries us from a C minor sound to a note that fits with the B diminished 7 chord underneath the 2nd bar. It's clear, it's melodic, and it emphasizes the beat by using entirely quarter notes. It sounds like something Tchaikovsky would write. The second melodic idea we get brings us from the 4th, this F, up to a G, the 5th, by way of this little decoration figure. This 2-bar melody repeats immediately, establishing itself as the core idea of the piece, and then we get to hear some melodic development. Let's call these 2 basic motifs Figure A and Figure B. Figure A being the leap down and walk up the C minor scale, and Figure B being the little decoration that carries us from one note to the note a step above it as a transition back into Figure A. This 3rd phrase, where the chords move down to an E flat over B flat, takes these 2 same melodic ideas but alters them to create a sense of forward progression. We take Figure A and replace the walk up the C minor scale with moving up an E flat major arpeggio leading to this high B flat note. Where Figure B would come in, we invert it, allowing the same melodic idea to carry us down a whole step rather than up a whole step. This brings us to an A flat note, and instead of leaping down and then walking up a scale, we invert Figure A and simply walk down the F minor scale until we get to this final D note. Here, the same kind of decoration that made up figure B, a neighbor motion stepping up to the note above and back down, is taken but stretched out in a different rhythm, and then we dip down to a B natural that leads us back to our tonic C note. This melody does resolve to the tonic C, but the strings intercept the resolution by dovetailing it into a repetition of the whole phrase. It's mostly pretty standard classical harmony. Leading tone B natural notes resolve cleanly back to our tonic C, and we end on this great 4-5 cadence to resolve back to the 1 chord. But this middle bit, where the B diminished 7 chord that previously resolved up to C minor slips down to an E flat over B flat, surprises us with a softer feeling. And then the following B flat minor chord introduces a sentimental element to the music. A B flat minor chord has a D flat note in it, which is not in the key of C minor, and you might think that using the flat second of the key would sound very dark. It certainly could be used to sound very dark or dissonant, but the way it's sandwiched in between the major E flat chord here and a move down to an A flat bass note in the following bar puts this B flat minor chord in a different light. B flat minor is borrowed from the key of A flat, and when this kind of borrowed chord is used to resolve to the flat 6 in a minor key, say A flat in the key of C minor, we get a sensitive, almost compassionate quality. Here, if we were very explicit with this move, it would sound like this. Of course, Cogwork Dancers doesn't indulge us fully in this kind of resolution, we just get a flash of this kind of sensitivity as we resolve down to an F minor over A flat. The bass motion implying the resolution to the sentimental flat 6 chord, while the upper harmony begins to set up our 4-5-1 back to C minor. But that B flat minor bar is the moment in the music where you can feel that the story behind these dancers might be a little more complicated than it seems. These 8 bars are the basic framework of the tune, which get repeated and developed as the piece goes on, and now that we've gone through them in such detail, we can move much more quickly through the piece to see how this happens. The second time around, when the strings take the melody, we get an extension of the phrase. The arpeggio version of figure A and B that play out over this E flat to B flat minor chunk repeats up in sequence, outlining first our F minor chord and then moving into an outline of a G minor arpeggio that ends with the major third B natural, making it a G major chord. This brings us to a doubled up inverted figure B bar that brings us back down from our increasing heights, knocking out a G to B natural over the C minor over G to G cadence at the end, which is possibly the most classical sounding of all cadences. This kind of development, this stretching the melody out from an 8-bar box into a longer phrase, in this case 11 bars, with melodic ideas repeatedly sequencing up or down by step, is very much the kind of thing you would find in Romantic era music. Tchaikovsky's work is littered with this kind of writing, particularly in transition segments moving between 2 main sections. If you're trying to evoke ballet, it's easy enough to use strings and minor key 5-1 cadences and then just call it a day, but this deeply informed approach to the composition, to make this piece a ballet work in its bones rather than just dressing up a more modern piece with classical instruments, shows the love and commitment Larkin had for making this music as good as it could be. Now, of course, once you've gotten the rhythm of these twin dancers under your thumbs and managed to get a couple of hits on them, the fight starts to escalate. The dancers regroup and then start their assault again at a faster tempo, so naturally, the music speeds up to match. But this isn't just a Mario Kart style last lap tempo shift where the same music is cranked up to a faster pace. The music for this section of the fight is completely rearranged to gear up the intensity along with the speed. We use the same theme, and once again it's on this F minor chord that the melody starts to stretch out. Rather than a variation of figure A, which is what we expect at this point of the melody takes the inverted figure B that came just a bar before and then continues to move it around, working through a twisty chord progression moving from F minor to F diminished to C minor, and then ending with this sudden resolution to D major via this A7 chord. This D chord kicks off a further development of the main theme of the piece, with variations on the same trading figure A and figure B ideas playing out over a new E flat major to D7 chord progression. The melody notes are altered to fit these new chords, which have a bizarre angle to them thanks to D7 being such a foreign chord in the key of C minor, and not resolving exactly the way you'd expect. This movement creates a real sense of unease. But this uneasy dance does resolve with that final phrase, a version of figure A descending in sequence down the C harmonic minor scale and harmonized with our original C minor to B diminished 7 over C to C minor cadence before ending once again on a C minor over G to C minor. The way the pair of bosses telegraph their attacks, you need to jump and dodge and attack in time with the music. They force you to participate in their deadly dance in order to battle them. When the music speeds up, the time you have to react is shorter, and so the intensity of the fight rises. You can feel yourself trying to keep up as you weave between your enemies, trying not to lose the beat, to keep your eye on both of them at once and still find time to get an attack in here and there in between it all. When you get to phase 3 of the fight, the intensity reaches a boiling point and pushes you into a full-on panic. Not only does the tempo increase considerably again, like you might expect, but the dancers now move out of sync with each other, meaning that the attacks are coming at twice the tempo they would be if the bosses were still attacking in unison. Where the first two phases had a natural rhythm to them of rest, attack, phase 3 devolves into an uninterrupted barrage of strikes. The music abandons the playful dance rhythm accompaniment that had bouncy chords marking every beat and instead dives headlong into string tremolo fury. Figure A of the melody is kept as is, just bowed more ferociously by the strings, but the breaks in the melody are removed. Figure B is transformed into this scale figure that moves down in sequence, filling up the whole piece with notes with no space in between them, just as there's now no space in between the oncoming cogwork clashes. This ferocious melody gives way to a segment of trading chords that perfectly embodies the battle. After a series of dramatic crescendos in the strings and horns, angry chord stabs bounce between the bass and higher register, low chords landing on the downbeats and high chords landing on the offbeats. This is exactly how the two robots are fighting now, each attacking on their own on the opposite beat from each other. This is such a perfect musical representation of the battle that I can't figure out if the gameplay design came out of the musical ideas or vice versa. The fact that it's not obvious which followed the other is proof of how great an idea for a boss fight it is. After this, the horns bring in figure A of the melody but drawn out into half notes, floating above the searing 8th note bass part, and then we see the melody develop through several keys. I'll note out the different iterations of figure A while we listen through so you can follow along with how it develops. Now, once you've bested them at their most chaotic, you manage to strike down one of the dancers and leave the other one on its own. And here is where phase 4 comes in. The lonely dancer continues to battle on its own, attacking at the original pace of the fight, which feels laughably easy after the gradual crescendo of intensity that you just had to deal with between the two bosses together. The music here is reduced to a simple music box version of the basic main theme, reminding you of the mechanical nature of these creatures. How easy to forget after the stirring performance you just had to execute. The musical and gameplay implication here is that this robot is useless without its partner, and you feel that sense of loss now that he's gone. A very depressing end to a battle, and one that feels like it could be in a Miyazaki game. And the rug pull of intensity in the music sells the moment perfectly. You go from hating these bosses and working your hardest to kill them, to feeling so bad for this guy in just a moment. Oh, sorry man, I gotta kill you, I'm sorry, I don't really mean it. A little bit of a lore deep dive reveals that this loss of robotic partner mirrors the very thing the model for these robots went through, and experiencing this loss in the gameplay like this makes discovering that story feel so much more visceral and impactful than if someone just sat you down and told you what happened. So I'm not going to sit you down and tell you what happened. Go play the game and figure it out for yourself. How amazing is it that video games give us a venue to discover composers who we would otherwise never know about? If Hollow Knight hadn't blown up on Kickstarter, there is just no chance I ever would have gotten to hear Christopher Larkin's music. His writing wouldn't gain traction in the Academy because it's too enjoyable to listen to, and if he pursued film scoring, he just wouldn't have a venue to write nearly the same amount of music within the same sonic world as he gets to with these games. Not to mention, film music doesn't have nearly the same standalone appeal that video game music does. How many young film composers from Australia come across your desk? Listening to Silksong's soundtrack makes me feel so lucky that I even got to hear Larkin's writing at all. He is such a treasure. His compositional voice is so clear and bold, and as reverent of the great composers of the past as it is comfortable in the present day. Now, I have another, bigger, broader take on Silksong's soundtrack coming that I'm really excited about, but I had to take the time to shed some special light on this battle as it truly is the standout musical moment in the game for me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.